The wedding of Alice Bennet and James Harrington was set to be the event of the decade. Billions of dollars were not just represented, but woven into the very fabric of the day, from the diamond dust on the champagne flutes to the couture gown clinging to Alice's blossoming figure. She was 5 months pregnant, carrying the heir to the Harrington empire, a fact that made their love story seem like a modern fairy tale. But as the orchestra began its prelude, just minutes before she was to walk down the aisle, Alice overheard a conversation not meant for her ears. A whisper that would turn her fairy tale into a waking nightmare and ignite a fire for revenge that would burn an empire to the ground. The Harrington estate sprawled over 500 acres of manicured Connecticut countryside, a testament to old money and unyielding power. The main house, a formidable Georgian mansion of pale stone and dark ivy, looked down a sloping lawn towards a private lake where swans drifted like forgotten dreams. It was here within these gilded walls that Alice Bennet had believed she'd found her forever. Her life before James Harrington had been quiet and academic. Raised by her brilliant inventor, Father Dr. Ethan Bennet, Alice grew up in a world of blueprints, algorithms, and the gentle hum of creation. Her father's work was his passion, particularly his final project, a revolutionary technology for decentralized clean energy production. He believed it could change the world. Alice believed in him. When he passed away from a sudden heart attack 2 years ago, he left her with his legacy a portfolio of patents and a profound sense of loss. It was during this period of grief that James Harrington had entered her life. He was everything. Her world was not dazzlingly confident, impossibly handsome, and the sole heir to Harrington Industries, a global energy conglomerate built on generations of oil and gas. He'd approached her at a tech symposium, expressing deep admiration for her father's work. His charm was a force of nature. He listened, he understood, and he made her laugh again. Their romance was a whirlwind, a blur of private jets to Paris, candlelit dinners on a yacht in the Mediterranean, and whispered promises under starry skies. James made her feel seen, not as the daughter of a famous inventor, but as Alice. He was fascinated by her mind, her quiet strength, and her dedication to her father's vision. When she discovered she was pregnant, his joy seemed boundless. He proposed that very night with a ring that held a diamond the size of a robin's egg, its facets catching the light and throwing rainbows across her tear-streaked face. Now, on her wedding day, the estate was a flurry of controlled chaos. Florists from Amsterdam had arranged thousands of white peonies and gardenias. A Michelin-starred chef was directing an army of caterers in a sprawling marquee. Guests, a who's who of global finance and industry, were beginning to arrive, their expensive cars crunching softly on the gravel driveway. In the bridal suite, a room larger than her entire childhood apartment, Alice stood before a full-length mirror. The custom-made gown, a cascade of silk and lace, was designed to both celebrate and accommodate her growing baby bump. Her reflection showed a woman on the precipice of everything she'd ever been told she should want. A loving husband, a family security beyond imagination. Her best friend and maid of honor. Sophie Chen adjusted the veil. "You look breathtaking, Al," Sophie said, her voice soft. "Absolutely ethereal." Sophie, a sharp-witted investigative journalist with eyes that missed nothing, had always been Alice's anchor. She'd been cautiously optimistic about James, her journalistic skepticism warring with her happiness for her friend. "I feel like I'm in a dream," Alice confessed, pressing a hand to her stomach, where a gentle flutter reminded her of the new life she carried. It's all so much. The house, the wedding, this... She gestured around the opulent room. Sometimes I wonder if he's marrying me or acquiring a new rare asset. Sophie smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Don't be silly. He adores you. Anyone can see that. He looks at you like you're the only person in the world. Alice wanted to believe it. She truly did. But a tiny, persistent whisper of doubt had taken root in her heart over the past few months. It was in the way James's eyes would sometimes glaze over when she spoke passionately about her father's technology. It was in the subtle, dismissive tone he used when she suggested starting a foundation to develop it for public good. He'd always wave it away with a charming smile, saying, "We have a lifetime to change the world, my love. Let's focus on our family first." And then there was his father, Arthur Harrington. A patriarch carved from granite and greed. Arthur regarded Alice with a chillingly polite indifference. He saw her as a vessel for his grandchild, a necessary component in the continuation of the Harrington dynasty. During their stilted conversations, his questions always circled back to one topic: her father's patents. He spoke of synergies and integration with the Harrington R&D department, his words cloaked in corporate jargon that made Alice's skin crawl. "Just pre-wedding jitters," Alice murmured, forcing a smile at her reflection. "Every bride gets them right. Even the ones marrying a billionaire prince," Sophie agreed, giving her a reassuring hug. "Now I'm going to go run interference with your future mother-in-law. I saw her trying to rearrange the floral arrangements at the altar. Try to take 5 minutes for yourself. Breathe. I'll be back just before it's time." Sophie slipped out of the room, leaving Alice in the echoing silence of her gilded cage. The orchestra outside swelled, playing a soft classical piece that drifted through the open French doors. Alice walked towards them, stepping onto a small stone balcony that overlooked a secluded rose garden. She needed a moment of peace, a breath of fresh air, before she walked into her new life. The heavy scent of roses filled the air, a scent she had always associated with love and happiness. Today it felt cloying, suffocating. She leaned against the balustrade, closing her eyes and trying to calm the sudden frantic beating of her heart. This was meant to be the happiest day of her life, so why did it feel like an ending? The bridal suite was part of a private wing of the mansion, designed for esteemed guests. The balcony where Alice stood was separated from the one adjoining the adjacent room, James's private study, by a thick wall of ivy climbing a trellis. Normally, it would afford complete privacy. But on this preternaturally still summer day, with the music lulling and the wind holding its breath, sound traveled in peculiar ways. As she took a deep, calming breath, she heard voices. A low, masculine rumble she instantly recognized as James's, and a silky feminine tone that was unnervingly familiar. Alice froze, her hand still pressed against her stomach. It was Veronica Dubois, the ruthlessly ambitious CEO of a rival energy firm, a woman James had always claimed to despise professionally. What was she doing here, in his private study, minutes before their wedding? Curiosity warred with a sudden cold dread. Alice found herself moving silently, pressing herself into the shadows of the balcony. Her ear angled towards the ivy-covered trellis that separated her from them. The French doors to James's study must have been open, just like hers. "The timing is perfect, I admit," Veronica was saying, her voice laced with a smug amusement. "The pregnant grieving orphan act is a masterstroke, James. She's completely besotted. She has no idea she's just a key. Ice flooded Alice's veins. Key. What was she talking about? James's laugh was a sound Alice had once cherished. Now it was stripped of all warmth, a cold metallic thing. She's been surprisingly easy to manage. All it took was a few romantic gestures and a sob story about wanting to honor her father's legacy. She's so blinded by the fairy tale, she can't see the cage being built around her. The world tilted on its axis. Alice clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp, her knuckles white. This couldn't be happening. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. And the patents? Veronica pressed her voice, sharp and clinical. Once you're married, they become marital assets, correct? Her little passion project becomes your property. Effectively, yes, James confirmed. Under the prenuptial agreement, she so trustingly signed all assets brought into the marriage remain separate, unless they are willingly integrated into a shared corporate entity for mutual benefit. The moment she agrees to let Harrington Industries develop her father's tech, which she will because she thinks I love her, it's mine. And once our son is born, my position is unassailable. The board, my father, everyone gets what they want. A wave of nausea so violent it buckled Alice's knees swept over her. The prenuptial agreement. Her lawyer had said it was standard ironclad. But James's own lawyer had inserted that clause, calling it a formality for future collaborations. Alice had thought it was a sign of his faith in their partnership. Now she saw it for the trap it was. And what about us? Veronica's voice dropped, becoming intimate, possessive. How long do I have to watch you play house with this naive little scientist? Alice's heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a painful thud. Patience, my dear. James soothed his voice, dripping with condescension. A year, maybe 2. Long enough to secure the tech, neutralize it, and ensure it never sees the light of day. My father would have a stroke if this clean energy nonsense ever threatened the family business. We bury it, our stock soars, and then Alice will have a tragic, unforeseen realization that we're not compatible. I'll be the grieving husband and devoted single father. She'll be well compensated for her troubles and sent on her way. No one will ever know. Neutralize it. Bury it. They weren't going to develop her father's life's work. They were going to destroy it. It was a corporate assassination, and she was the weapon they were using to carry it out. Her father's dream of providing clean, affordable energy to the world. It was all a lie. Her love, her baby, their future, it was all a monstrous, calculated lie. You're a cold bastard, James Harrington. Veronica purred, a note of genuine admiration in her voice. That's why I love you, and that's why we make such a good team, he replied. A faint clinking of glasses followed. They were toasting to her destruction. The sound of their shared laughter was the most brutal blow of all. It shattered to the last vestiges of Alice's denial. The man she loved, the father of her child, was a monster. He had not just deceived her. He had desecrated the memory of her father, weaponized her grief, and planned to cast her aside like a piece of garbage once she had served her purpose. The world went silent. The music, the birds, the distant murmur of the guests, it all faded into a deafening roar in her ears. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over her. The shock was a physical thing, a shard of ice piercing her heart and spreading its frost through every inch of her body. For a moment she could barely breathe. She felt the ghost of her former self, the trusting, hopeful woman in the white dress, die right there on that sun-drenched balcony. And in her place, something new, something worse and cold and dangerous began to form. For a long, suspended moment, Alice didn't move. She was a statue carved from ice, her hand still pressed over her mouth, her eyes fixed on the vibrant green ivy of the trellis. A beautiful facade hiding the ugliest of truths. The gentle flutter in her womb, once a source of joy, now felt like a desperate plea, a tiny life tethered to this catastrophic deception. Her baby. Their baby. The thought was a fresh stab of pain. This child was meant to be a symbol of their love, but it was just a tool, a final lock on her cage. Her first instinct was to run, to tear off the veil, rip the suffocating dress from her body, and flee the estate, leaving this nightmare behind. But where would she go? James Harrington's power and influence were like a spider's web spun across the globe. He would find her. He would paint her as hysterical, a hormonal pregnant woman who had a breakdown. He would use his wealth and his army of lawyers to take her child from her. He had already laid the groundwork, describing her as a grieving orphan. He would twist her pain into a weapon against her. No. Running was a surrender. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. The heartbreak was a deep physical chasm inside her, but grief would have to wait. The love she'd felt for James curdled into something else, something potent and chilling rage. A cold, clear and precise fury that burned away the fog of shock. He called her a key. He thought she was naive. He had underestimated her. Her father hadn't just taught her about science. He had taught her about systems, about leverage, about finding the single point of failure that could bring a complex structure crashing down. James Harrington and his father had built an empire of lies, and Alice, the easy-to-manage little scientist, was about to become its architect of ruin. With a steadiness that defied the tremor in her soul, she pulled her phone from the small silk purse she'd left on the balcony table. Her hands were shaking, but her movements were deliberate. She swiped to the voice recorder app, her thumb hovering over the red button. She needed more than her word against his. She needed irrefutable proof. She crept back to the trellis, positioning the phone's microphone in a gap in the leaves. She prayed they were still talking. "Father will be pleased," James was saying. "The board meeting next quarter will be a celebration, the final neutralization of the Bennett threat." Alice hit record. The small digital timer on her screen began to tick upwards each second, a silent testament to his treason. She captured another 30 seconds of their self-congratulatory, planning their casual discussion of her impending divorce and Veronica's sickening, flirtatious laughter. It was enough. It was everything. She saved the file, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Just as she slipped the phone back into her purse, the door to the suite opened. It was Sophie, her face bright and smiling. "It's almost time. The guests are seated. The groom is waiting, ready to become Mrs. Harrington." The smile vanished from Sophie's face the moment she saw Alice. Alice hadn't realized she had moved back into the room, standing like a ghost in the center of the sunlit space. Her face must have been a mask of horror. "Al, what is it? What's wrong? You're as white as your dress." Alice couldn't speak. She simply raised a trembling hand and pointed towards the balcony, then back to her own ear. Sophie's journalistic instincts took over. She closed the door silently, her eyes scanning the room, her expression shifting from concern to high alert. "What did you hear?" she whispered. Words failed Alice. Instead, she took out her phone again, her fingers fumbling with the screen. She found the recording and played it. She kept the volume low, just enough for the two of them to hear. As the chilling conversation filled the silent room, James's cold pronouncements, Veronica's smug replies, their shared cruel laughter. Sophie's face transformed. Her friendly concern hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Her gaze shifted from the phone to Alice's shattered expression to the gentle curve of her belly and back again. When the recording finished, Sophie didn't say a word. She simply reached out, her touch firm and grounding on Alice's arm. The snake, Sophie breathed, her voice a low hiss. The absolute, venomous snake. She took a deep breath, her mind clearly racing. Okay, we have options. We can leave. I can get you out of here right now. We'll go to the press. We'll release this recording. We will destroy him. Alice finally found her voice, and it was a sound she didn't recognize. It was brittle and cold, devoid of the warmth it once held. No, she said, shaking her head. If we run, he controls the story. He'll sue, he'll spin it, he'll bury us in litigation and lies. Releasing the recording to the press anonymously is just one shot. He'll claim it's fake, a deep fake created by a corporate rival. By Veronica, even. He'll turn them against each other. She looked up, and the look in her eyes made Sophie draw in a sharp breath. The hurt was still there, but it was overshadowed by a terrifying resolve. He wants a show, Alice said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He's built this entire spectacle, this perfect wedding, as the stage for his victory. He wants to stand up there in front of the world and formalize his ownership of me and my father's legacy. She straightened her shoulders, a queen preparing for battle. I think it's only fair that we use his stage for a slightly different performance. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Sophie's face. Al, what are you thinking? Alice looked at her reflection in the mirror. The image of the perfect bride was a lie, a costume. But she would play the part for a little while longer. He is not going to get away with this, Alice declared. He's not just going to lose me. He's going to lose everything, in front of everyone. The humiliation he planned for me. In a year's time, he's going to get a taste of it today. This isn't going to be a wedding. It's going to be a reckoning. The first notes of the wedding march, Wagner's iconic bridal chorus, swelled from the string quartet positioned near the floral arch. The sound, meant to be triumphant and joyous, felt like a funeral dirge to Alice. Every guest turned in their seat, their faces beaming with anticipation, ready to witness the fairy tale union of beauty and power. They were all props in James's elaborate play, unwitting spectators to a grand act of betrayal. Sophie gave Alice's hand one last squeeze. Are you sure about this? She whispered. Her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and terror. Once you do this, there's no going back. He made that choice for me, Alice replied, her voice steady. She adjusted the delicate lace of her sleeve, her movements calm and precise. She was no longer a victim succumbing to shock. She was a general on the eve of battle. Her strategy set her resolve absolute. She had airdropped the audio file to Sophie's phone, a crucial backup. They had a plan. It was audacious, insane, and utterly terrifying. It was perfect. Alice took her bouquet of white peonies from the waiting attendant. As she stepped into the sunlight at the top of the aisle, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. She was, by all accounts, the perfect bride. Radiant, serene, a picture of love and happiness. No one could see the Arctic winter that had frozen her heart. No one could see the warrior looking out from behind her eyes. Her gaze swept over the assembled guests, the titans of industry, the political figures, the socialites, all smiling, all complicit in their ignorance. Then her eyes landed on the end of the aisle. There stood James Harrington, looking impossibly handsome in his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit. He was smiling a wide, confident possessor's smile. It was the same smile he'd given her that first night, the one she'd thought was just for her. Now she saw it for what it was, the predatory grin of a shark. Beside him stood his father, Arthur Harrington, his face a mask of stoic approval. He caught Alice's eye and gave a curt, proprietary nod. He believed he was moments away from acquiring the final piece of his puzzle, the key to neutralizing a threat to his fossil fuel empire. They were both so sure of their victory. As Alice began her slow walk down the aisle, she focused on James's face. She let the memories of their time together flash through her mind. The laughter, the tenderness, the promises. She let herself feel the searing pain of the betrayal one last time, not as a weakness, but as fuel. She channeled it, hardened it, shaped it into the weapon she was about to wield. When she reached the altar, James took her hand. His touch was warm, his skin familiar. It sent a jolt of revulsion through her, but she did not flinch. She smiled up at him, a perfect, practiced, bridal smile. "You look beautiful, my love," he murmured, his voice low and intimate for her ears only. "Our future starts now." Oh, you have no idea, she thought. The officiant, a retired judge and old family friend of the Harringtons, began the ceremony. He spoke of love, of trust, of partnership, of building a future together. Every word was a lie, a bitter irony, that Alice absorbed in silence. She kept her eyes on James, maintaining the illusion, letting him believe he had won. Finally, the moment came. "And now," the officiant said, beaming at the happy couple, "we come to the vows. But first, if there is anyone present who has as just cause to object to this union, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." A polite, expectant silence fell over the crowd. This was the traditional theatrical pause before the final act. In the front row, Veronica Dubois watched with a smug, knowing look on her face, a predator enjoying the show. In that silence, Alice turned her head slightly, her smile never wavering, and spoke in a clear, calm voice that carried through the quiet air. "I do." A confused murmur rippled through the guests. James's smile faltered. He looked at her, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Darling," he whispered, a hint of irritation in his voice. "That's not your line." "I have an erection," Alice stated, her voice stronger now, ringing with an authority no one had ever heard from her before. She turned to face the stunned crowd. "I object to this union," the officiant stammered. "Alice, my dear, I think you're—" "I object," she repeated, cutting him off, "because I have discovered that this marriage is not a union of love. It is a fraudulent business transaction." James grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly tight. "Alice, what the hell are you doing? Stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." His eyes were bead with panic. Alice pulled her arm from his grasp. "Am I?" she asked, her voice dripping ice. "Or am I embarrassing you?" She reached into a small hidden pocket, sewn into the seam of her gown, a last-minute addition by a trusted seamstress at Sophie's request. She pulled out her phone and a small, powerful Bluetooth speaker no bigger than a pebble. She held it up for everyone to see. "I think you all deserve to hear the truth. The real vows. The ones my fiancé made just a few minutes ago, when he thought no one was listening." Arthur Harrington was on his feet now, his face purple with rage. "Security, stop this nonsense!" But it was too late. Alice tapped the screen of her phone. The speaker, small as it was powerful. James's cold, calculating voice filled the stunned silence of the Marquis. "She's so blinded by the fairy tale, she can't see the cage being built around her." A collective gasp went through the crowd. James's face turned ashen. Veronica Dubois looked as if she'd been slapped. The recording continued playing every damning word. The plan to seize the patents. The plot to neutralize her father's life's work. The cold-blooded strategy to divorce her after a year or two and cast her aside. And then the final gut-wrenching sound, his shared laughter with Veronica. When the recording finished, a deafening silence descended. No one moved. No one spoke. The fairy tale had shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, and the ugly reality was laid bare for all to see. Alice turned to James. The mask of the loving bride was gone. Her face was a portrait of cold, righteous fury. She took the magnificent diamond ring from her finger, the one he had proposed with. She didn't throw it. She held it out to him, her hand perfectly steady. "You called me a key," she said, her voice low but carrying to every corner of the tent. "You were wrong. I'm not the key. I am the door, and I'm closing it on you." She let the ring drop. It hit the stone steps of the altar with a small, pathetic clink, then rolled to a stop at his feet. She looked past him at the sea of shocked faces at the collapsing empire of his reputation. Then, with a composure that stunned everyone, she turned her beautiful gown trailing behind her and walked back down the aisle alone. She walked not as a jilted bride, but as a queen who had just won her kingdom back. The moment Alice disappeared from the Marquis, chaos erupted. It was not loud and riotous, but a far more potent kind of chaos for this echelon of society. A maelstrom of frantic whispers, sidelong glances, and the furious, silent tapping of thumbs on screens. The story was already breaking, spreading from the phones of the guests to the newsrooms of the world's most powerful media outlets. The wedding of the year had become the scandal of the century. James Harrington stood frozen at the altar, his face a ghastly shade of pale. His father Arthur was roaring at his security team, his voice a low growl of impotent fury. "Find her. Stop her from leaving. Confiscate every phone." But it was like trying to cup water in a fist. The information was already out, a digital wildfire that could not be contained. Sophie, who had positioned herself near the exit, watched Alice walk past, giving her a subtle, triumphant nod before melting into the crowd. Her job now was to manage the narrative to feed the right information to her trusted contacts in the press, ensuring that Alice's side of the story, the truth, was the one that took hold. Alice didn't run. She walked with purpose straight through the main house, ignoring the shocked faces of the staff. Her prearranged driver, a man loyal to Sophie, was waiting at a discreet side entrance. As she got into the car, she finally allowed herself a single shuddering breath. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving a hollow, aching void where her heart used to be. But there was no time for tears. The war had just begun. Back at the Marquis, James was besieged. Reporters who had been stationed outside the gates, hoping for a photo of the happy couple, had been alerted by texts from inside. They swarmed the venue, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. James, flanked by security, pushed his way through his only comment, a snarled no comment. Arthur was more combative, threatening lawsuits against anyone who printed these slanderous, doctored recordings. Veronica Dubois tried to slip away unnoticed, but she was too high profile. A reporter cornered her. "Ms. Dubois, your voice was on that recording. Are you having an affair with Mr. Harrington? Was this a corporate conspiracy?" She gave a venomous glare and hissed, "This is a private matter," before disappearing into her own car. Her carefully constructed reputation as a formidable independent businesswoman was now tainted by the stench of a sordid and predatory affair. By evening, the Harrington empire was in full-blown crisis mode. Their PR team issued a statement calling the incident a deplorable personal attack by a clearly unstable and emotionally distressed woman. They claimed the audio was a sophisticated deep fake, a fabrication engineered by their corporate enemies. They tried to paint Alice as a gold digger, who, upon realizing the prenuptial agreement wasn't as favorable as she'd hoped, had staged this elaborate stunt for a bigger payout. But their narrative wasn't holding. Sophie had been ruthlessly efficient. She had already leaked a secondary piece of evidence to a Pulitzer-winning journalist at the New York Times, a short video clip from a security camera in a hotel lobby from a month prior. It showed James and Veronica entering an elevator together late at night, their body language intimate and undeniable. It corroborated the affair, punching a significant hole in the deep-fake defense. James tried to reach Alice, his calls and texts a frantic barrage. They started as seemingly heartfelt apologies. "Alice, my love, please. It's not what you think. We can fix this. I was set up. Let me explain." When she didn't answer, the tone shifted to frustration. "Alice, stop being childish. You are carrying my son. We have to present a united front." Finally, they devolved into threats. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I will ruin you. You will never see a penny, and I will make sure you never see your child." Alice read each message with a cold, detached calm. They were the desperate flailings of a man who had lost control. She was safe holed up in a secure, undisclosed location Sophie had arranged. She blocked his number. The days that followed were a media frenzy. Talk shows debated the scandal. Financial news outlets questioned the stability of Harrington Industries, whose stock had taken a noticeable dip. The story had everything: wealth, sex, betrayal, and a brilliant, wronged woman. Alice, by remaining silent and invisible, became an enigma. The public, naturally inclined to root for the underdog, sided with the pregnant bride who had stood up to a billionaire bully. The Harringtons' attempt to sear her backfired spectacularly, making them look even more guilty and cruel. Arthur Harrington, realizing their initial strategy had failed, shifted tactics. He initiated legal proceedings, filing a lawsuit against Alice for defamation and breach of contract, citing the wedding costs. It was a classic power play: drown the opponent in legal fees until they break. He also had his lawyers draw up papers to establish James's paternity and sue for full custody of the unborn child the moment it was born, citing Alice's demonstrated mental instability. They thought they were cornering her. They thought she was hiding, scared and alone. They couldn't have been more wrong. Alice wasn't hiding. She was preparing. In the quiet solitude of her new anonymous life, she wasn't mourning the end of her fairy tale. She was methodically gathering her forces and studying the blueprints of the empire she was about to dismantle. 4 months after the wedding that wasn't Alice gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She held him in her arms, his small, perfect face, a mixture of her features, and she had to admit James's. Looking at him, she felt a fierce, primal wave of love and protection that solidified her resolve. She named him Ethan after her father. He would be a Bennett, not a Harrington. He would be a builder, not a destroyer. The Harringtons' legal threats had been relentless, a storm of paper designed to intimidate and exhaust her. But they had made a critical miscalculation. They assumed she was a penniless orphan. They were unaware that her father, a man who trusted systems more than people, had set up a series of complex trusts for her. She wasn't a billionaire, but she had more than enough resources to fight back. She hired a legal team, not from a big corporate firm that could be bought or intimidated by the Harringtons, but a boutique law firm known for taking on giant corporations in intellectual property disputes. Led by a brilliant, tenacious lawyer named Maria Flores, they were sharks who smelled blood in the water. While the world saw only silence, Alice was in constant motion. The public humiliation at the wedding was just the opening salvo. The real war would be fought on the battlefield. The Harringtons understood best the corporate world. Her first move was to re-examine her father's work. She spent weeks in a secure data facility, poring over every blueprint, every equation, every notebook he had left behind. James and his father had only seen the patents as a threat to be buried. They didn't understand the true scope of what Dr. Bennett had created. It wasn't just one invention. It was an entire ecosystem, a new method for energy storage, a revolutionary grid management algorithm, and a hyper-efficient solar capture material. It was a complete turnkey solution to transition away from fossil fuels. Armed with this deeper understanding, Alice did something bold. She established the Bennett Foundation for Sustainable Energy. Its stated mission was to develop and license her father's technology for the betterment of humanity. She funded it herself using a significant portion of her inheritance. This one move transformed her public image. She was no longer just the wronged ex-fiancée. She was a philanthropist and an innovator, the true heir to her father's legacy. The press loved it. The story shifted from a personal scandal to a David versus Goliath battle for the future of energy. Sophie's role was crucial. She used her investigative skills to dig deep into Harrington Industries. She cultivated sources, followed money trails, and uncovered a pattern of behavior. The Harringtons had a history of acquiring promising green tech startups through shell corporations, only to strip them of their patents and shut them down. Her father wasn't their first victim. He was just the most significant. Together, Alice and Sophie began to build their case. They found disgruntled former Harrington employees, scientists whose work had been suppressed, and executives who had been forced out for raising ethical concerns. Maria Flores's legal team took their sworn affidavits, compiling a mountain of evidence. The Harringtons were watching, of course. Arthur saw the Bennett Foundation as a public relations stunt, a nuisance, but not a genuine threat. "Let her play with her little charity," he reportedly told his board. "She has no manufacturing capacity, no distribution network. The technology will die on the vine." That's when Alice made her next move, the one that truly stunned them. She announced the Foundation's first strategic partner, a consortium of Japanese and German engineering firms, the biggest global competitors to Harrington Industries. She wasn't going to try to build an empire from scratch. She was going to license the technology to the Harringtons' enemies. The deal she structured was brilliant. She didn't sell the patents. She licensed them, retaining ownership, while allowing these powerful companies to bring the products to market. The news sent a shockwave through the financial world. Harrington Industries' stock, which had been slowly recovering, took a nosedive. Investors started to panic. Why was their company, a supposed leader in energy, sitting on the sidelines, while their competitors were about to leapfrog them with world-changing technology that, as the media gleefully pointed out, should have been theirs? James, who had been relegated to a diminished role in the company by his furious father, was in turmoil. He saw the woman he had dismissed as naive and easy to manage outmaneuvering him at every turn. He saw the son he was legally trying to claim being raised under the banner of the man whose legacy he had tried to destroy. The empire he was meant to inherit was now under threat because of his own hubris. The cage he had built for Alice had in fact been a crucible, forging her into the one person who could bring his entire world crashing down. The partnership announcement was a declaration of war. For Arthur Harrington, it was the ultimate betrayal. He had spent a lifetime building an empire on the bedrock of fossil fuels, crushing any threat to its dominance. Now the ghost of Ethan Bennett, channeled through his daughter, was poised to make his entire legacy obsolete. Arthur's response was swift and brutal. He launched a multi-front assault. Legally, his lawyers filed injunctions to block the technology licensing, claiming that a verbal agreement between James and Alice constituted a prior claim. It was a flimsy argument, but it was designed to mire the Bennett Foundation in years of costly litigation. In the media, a new, more vicious smear campaign began. Pro-Harrington pundits and online trolls painted Alice as a foreign agent, selling out American innovation to international competitors. They questioned her patriotism, her business acumen, and even her fitness as a mother. But Alice had anticipated this. She was no longer the trusting woman who signed a prenup without scrutinizing every clause. She was a strategist, and she had learned from her enemy. Her legal team, led by Maria Flores, didn't just defend. They counterattacked. They filed a massive lawsuit against Harrington Industries, James and Arthur personally. The charges were explosive corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, conspiracy to defraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit cited not only Alice's case, but also included the sworn affidavits from the other scientists and startups the Harringtons had crushed over the years. Sophie's investigative work formed the backbone of the filing, a meticulously documented history of predatory practices. This transformed the case from a he-said, she-said dispute into a potential class action lawsuit that threatened the very foundation of the company. The public relations battle also turned in her favor. Instead of hiding, Alice decided to speak. She agreed to a single exclusive interview with a respected veteran journalist, known for her tough but fair approach. The interview was broadcast on primetime television. Alice walked onto the set not as a victim, but as a composed, articulate CEO. She spoke not of heartbreak, but of her father's vision. She laid out the science of his technology in clear, compelling terms that a layperson could understand. She explained her decision to license the technology globally, framing it as a moral imperative to combat climate change, not a business move. When asked about the wedding, her voice remained steady. What happened to me personally was a painful, but ultimately clarifying experience, she said, looking directly into the camera. It revealed that some people and some corporations will do anything to protect the past, even if it means sacrificing the future. The Bennett Foundation is not about revenge. It's about ensuring the future wins. She was magnificent. She was credible, passionate, and inspiring. The public rallied behind her. Future Wins started trending on social media. Activist groups and environmental organizations championed her cause. The narrative was no longer in the Harringtons' control. Inside Harrington Industries, the walls were closing in. The board of directors, once a rubber stamp for Arthur's iron-fisted rule, was growing restless. The stock was in free fall. Their competitors were already tooling up factories to produce the Bennett technology, and the Harrington legal strategy seemed to be backfiring, generating nothing but negative headlines. They were losing market share, public trust, and the confidence of Wall Street. James was a ghost haunting the executive suite. His father had stripped him of all meaningful responsibilities, yet forced him to come to the office every day as a form of punishment. He watched as Alice, the woman he had so casually planned to discard, became an international icon. He saw pictures of her with their son Ethan, and felt a pang of something he couldn't identify, not loss of property, but genuine regret. He had not only lost the technology, he had lost a family. He had destroyed the only pure and good thing that had ever been in his life, all for the approval of a father who now looked at him with nothing but contempt. The tipping point came from an unexpected quarter. Sophie's digging had unearthed one final devastating secret. Arthur Harrington had been using a secret slush fund to pay off politicians and regulators to block green energy legislation for years. The fund was funneled through a series of offshore shell companies, but Sophie, with the help of a forensic accountant, had found the link back to Harrington Industries. This wasn't just unethical, it was highly illegal. With this final piece of ammunition, Alice knew it was time. The legal battles and the media war were just shaping the battlefield. The final confrontation had to be face to face. The annual Harrington Industries shareholder meeting was in 2 weeks. It was typically a tightly controlled theatrical event where Arthur would announce record profits and continued dominance. This year, Alice decided it would be a trial, and she would be the prosecution. The grand ballroom of the Regent Hotel was a cathedral of capitalism. Hundreds of shareholders, analysts, and journalists filled the seats, a nervous energy crackling in the air. The vast screens on either side of the stage showed the Harrington Industries logo against a backdrop of oil rigs and power plants, symbols of a fading era. The company's stock ticker was displayed in the corner, a steady, bleeding red line. Arthur Harrington stood at the podium, a grim captain on the deck of a sinking ship. He looked older, his usual robust confidence replaced by a brittle defiance. He tried to project strength, speaking of market headwinds and unfounded attacks, but his words rang hollow. James sat in the front row with the other board members, his face pale and drawn, a prince in a fallen kingdom. The meeting proceeded with a tense funereal air. When the floor was opened for questions from shareholders, a few softball queries were lobbed by known loyalists. Then a figure stood up in the back of the room. A spotlight swiveled, and a collective gasp swept through the ballroom. It was Alice Bennett. She was not dressed for a fight. She wore a simple, elegant business dress, her hair pulled back professionally. She looked not like a scorned woman, but like the CEO she was. Beside her stood her lawyer, Maria Flores, and a small team carrying briefcases. "Mr. Harrington," Alice said, her voice amplified by the microphone, clear and steady. "Alice Bennett, founder of the Bennett Foundation. I'm also, through my late father's portfolio, a shareholder in this company. I have a few questions." Arthur's face contorted in a mask of fury. "You are not recognized," he snapped. "This is a private meeting." "I believe my shareholder status gives me the right to speak," Alice countered smoothly. "And I believe my fellow shareholders would be very interested in the answers to my questions." A murmur of agreement went through the crowd. They wanted to see the show. Before Arthur could have her removed, Maria Flores stepped forward. "My client has a legal right to be here. Furthermore, we have just served every member of your board with a copy of our latest filing, which includes a motion for an emergency injunction to freeze the assets of this company, pending a criminal investigation." Panic erupted. Board members began frantically opening the folders they had just been handed. James stared at Alice, his expression a mixture of shock and something akin to awe. Alice took control of the room. "My first question is for you, Mr. Harrington. Can you please explain to the shareholders why for the last decade, Harrington Industries has systematically acquired and suppressed at least 5 different green technologies as detailed in the documents you now have before you. Was this sound business strategy, or was it a conspiracy to maintain a monopoly in direct violation of antitrust laws? Arthur sputtered. Those were failed ventures, non-viable technologies. Non-viable. Alice pressed her voice, cutting through his defense. Like my father's. The same non-viable technology that our German and Japanese partners project will capture 30% of the global energy market within 5 years. The technology your own son tried to steal through a fraudulent marriage proposal. She turned her attention to James. James, a question for you. When you and Veronica Dubois discussed neutralizing my father's work, were you acting on your own, or were you following your father's orders? James looked from Alice to his father, trapped. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was broken. Let me answer for him, Alice said, turning back to Arthur. Because this was never just about James. It was about you, Arthur. It was about your fear of the future. She gestured to the screen behind him. That is your legacy. Oil rigs and pollution. My father dreamed of a different legacy, and you tried to bury it. She played her final card. And to ensure that future never came, you didn't just suppress innovation. You corrupted our political system. On the main screens, the Harrington logo was replaced by a complex web of offshore accounts and money transfers, culminating in a list of politicians who had received illegal campaign contributions. It was Sophie's final masterpiece. This is evidence of a decade-long scheme to bribe officials and block climate legislation. The SEC and the Department of Justice have had this information for 48 hours. I believe they will be making a public announcement shortly. Checkmate. The room descended into utter pandemonium. Board members were shouting at Arthur. Journalists were sprinting for the exits, yelling into their phones. The Harrington House of Cards had not just fallen. It had been utterly obliterated. In the midst of the chaos, Alice walked from the back of the room towards the stage. Security guards moved to intercept her, but they paused, uncertain-looking, to a now powerless Arthur for direction. She walked past them. Her gaze locked on James. She stopped in front of him. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with the shame of his utter defeat. "It's over, James," she said, her voice quiet, meant only for him. "Alice, he began, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. For everything." Alice looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the monster from the recording, but a weak man who had made a catastrophic choice out of fear and a desperate need for his father's approval. She felt a flicker of something not forgiveness, but a sad, final pity. "So am I, James," she said. "So am I." She turned away from him and from the wreckage of his family's empire. She walked out of the ballroom, leaving the chaos behind her, and stepped out into the clean, bright light of the day, a future of her own making awaiting her. In the end, the fall of the Harrington Empire was swift and total. Arthur Harrington was arrested, his legacy forever tarnished by scandal and corruption. The company was broken up, sold for parts, a dinosaur bone picked clean by its competitors. James, in exchange for his testimony against his father, avoided prison time, but lost everything else, his wealth, his name, his future. He faded into a quiet, anonymous obscurity, a ghost of the man he was supposed to be. Alice, however, thrived. The Bennett Foundation became a global force for good, its technology powering cities and empowering developing nations. She never sought the spotlight, but her work spoke for itself, earning her respect and admiration around the world. She raised her son, Ethan, in a home filled with love, curiosity, and the true legacy of his grandfather, the belief that one person's vision can indeed change the world. She proved that the greatest revenge isn't destruction, but construction. She didn't just tear down an old, corrupt world. She built a new, better one in its place, powered by the light of her father's genius and the strength of her own unbreakable spirit. Thank you for listening to this story of betrayal and incredible resilience. If you were moved by Alice's journey, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. What did you think of her ultimate revenge? Let us know in the comments below. For more stories of karma, justice, and the power of the human spirit, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in the next story.